Oops. So today we're going to talk about report stats. We're going to talk about why to use stats on your reports, how to add and edit them, and then some tips and tricks that I find are useful with the report stats. So first off is like, why would we even use stats? Stats are on reports, and they are going to help generate some statistics for the report that you're looking at. Will help you analyze, maintain data, and also maintain data integrity. So looking for empty records, looking just to make sure that things are aligning. If you had international program and then you've got some domestic cities or something in there, like you can kind of reference a little bit easier than looking at a full report. And it will also help you filter so you can narrow some of your results. And we'll show you how all of that works once we jump in. So you can think of report stats as a very simple dashboard. Then below the report stat will be the report that the report stats are based off of, which will be all the corresponding records. At the top of reports, there's a little link that you can use to show or hide the report stats. The stats can show you counts. They can show you percentages, and then they can also include aggregates of relative information. And so we'll look at those as well. And if you were to click on any of these values, it would filter the report records. So we'll jump right into SAM. I'm going to show you how those things work. This is a family report. It should be all families. It's always really important to make sure that when you're looking at reports, you're talking apples to apples. So under options, you can look at report configuration. And this tells you what tables are on the report and any filters that are applied to the report by default. So in this case, I've got 4 different tables here. There are no filters, so I should be looking at all families. It's not specific to a program or families that inquired in a certain time period or something like that. It is all family records in this database. And it is sorted, though, by inquiry received date descending. So the most recent inquiries are right here at the top is what we should be seeing. But that's always really important. The show hide, very easy, kind of up here at the top. And then you can have any number of report stats. The way that SAM shows them, 4, 5 is a good fit. If there are more, they will display, but you would have to scroll over, okay, right and left to see all of those if there were more. The report stats here, you can base report stats off any of the fields in the database, and it'll give you by default kind of the count of records that are on this report that fit that specific value. So it'll display here all the different values that are entered into your system, and then it'll give you a count. You can choose to either show the count or not, because depending on what information you're trying to derive from the report stat, count might not even make any sense, or might not rather be important. The percentage of the count, and then potentially you've got aggregates. So this one is set up as the length of adoptions finalized. So it is really showing us the time between, the average number of days in between application and adoption finalized for adoptions that were finalized in different years. Okay, is what this is showing. So there were 4 adoptions finalized, and for 2017, took a really long period of time to close those. So that might be some information that we can, do something about for that particular year. I am able to then filter by clicking on 2017, filter the report to those 4 families that have that information. All of them have the adoption finalized date. Okay, that's kind of general use. The other thing here to see is there's an edit link here. So you can manage this report stat. Under options, you can add a report stat. Okay, so those are kind of things that you can do as we move into our next section of this webinar. Jump in here. Right, next thing we're gonna do is add them. So it's super important when we're looking at reports is like, what are we trying to derive from this? Again, you can pull on a report stat based on any field in the system that, let's say, is one of the tables on the report, right? So again, I've got the option of choosing any one of these, any fields from any one of these tables. I don't believe I can pull, I'm almost positive you're not going to be able to pull like communications, a report stat about communications on this report unless I added that table to the report. Okay, so, but anything goes here, but not everything is going to make sense or even be important to pull. So think about why you would build that report. This length of adoptions, I'm going to go in here and edit this, and then I'll show how to add. So when you click edit, edit settings is here. And at the top, I'm choosing what table and then what field. Right, so this is a list of every field in the system that is underneath that table. So I choose adoptions that are finalized, the finalized dates. I can choose to override instead, if I had nothing here, it would just say adoption finalized date, which doesn't really help us that much. And I think this that are finalized in the specific year would be more helpful. It's more clear of what we're trying to display and show in this. For date fields, one of the tips and tricks is the different kinds of date options. If I had every single date displayed, if I choose none or regular for date options, I'm going to get a lot of information that's actually not helpful. It doesn't kind of summarize things very well for us. So for dates there, you can look at these different options, the year and the month, the year and the quarter. It kind of depends on what you're looking to do. This is where the stat types, you can choose record counts or the percent. It might be interesting to know the record counts. We might want to know the percent. Maybe we don't want to know the percent. And in this case, totals. So totaling the total number of days doesn't help us at all. So it would be taking the time frames to complete these adoptions in those specific years and just summing that all together. It's not super helpful. Totaling would be really helpful for accounting. It could be helpful for like a number of hours, but for the total number of days for all of the different adoptions probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But the average, so the average length of time, maybe even the minimum and maximum, would be really helpful for us to understand. I have chosen an aggregate field. Once I make these selections here, I can choose an aggregate field. Sam will, at this point, only provide those fields that it can do calculations for. So I wouldn't be able to choose another date field here or a list field. But I can choose things that have a number associated with them, like number or currency. And then I can always determine my order by. How is it ordered? I prefer looking at things generally by the record count and descending, so I can see what's the most, depending again on why you're doing a report stat. Seeing things that have the least amount of value might be more helpful. Or in this case, because in my opinion, average is going to make more sense than other things. Maybe I wanted to look at where the maximum was so high or was at the top. That would be helpful as well. Okay, and so those are you're going to choose make choices depending again on why. There's some small miscellaneous options to like always show the report stats. You could still be able to hide them here, so that's just an option. We could total things at the bottom. I don't think in this case it makes sense, but for total hours working with clients, for total amounts of funds received, that makes sense. And then if you've got like all of your states or all of your programs or even all of your years, but you really, every time you see these report stats by default only want to see the most recent 5, you can put in a number to show a certain number of records. And so now when I look at this report stat that we made modifications on, I had changed it here. I've got the count. I had dropped out the percentage. And so our average time in 2017 is 2,772 days. That's a really long adoption process. But my data entry is not very good in this system. The minimum amount of time and the maximum amount of time for this particular year. You know what? Let me take a stab at this and see if I showed totals here. I'm not sure if this is only, it looks like it shows us the average total, but again, it's not super helpful. So we've had 111 total adoptions that are shown, because this still includes those cases that are empty. And then it's totaling our average. It's kind of weird to total an average. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But the count in some cases can make sense. To add new report stats, you can click Edit and Add New. You might go to Options and Add Report Stat. You might also do this from the report builder and add a report stat. There's been a bug in the ordering of report stats, which can be done through Edit Order. And I feel like right here, if you access it from here, you're able to modify the column order. Okay, so this way allows you to do it. I think if you go through the report builder, I think it has an issue. And look, it's been cleared up, so life is good, okay? So those things are working as expected at this point. You have this ability, there's little links here to show all or show the subset of the records. I think an important piece to the report stats is to view what is empty. Because empty empty is going to tell you something. It either tells you that data entry is not being done, depending on what the field is, or it can tell you that there's no records or no values there for that particular record. So it depends again on basically on the context, right, of that field and how it relates to what you're doing. But I think empty is a really important one to kind of take a peek at from time to time. Let's see that. Let's see. If I go back to I think it's important, right? So I just talked about empty. Using the correct report stat is important. So setting whether it's totals and getting the counts versus the average, it really, again, just depends on your context. I also think keeping your reports neat is important for report stats to make sense for you. So simplifying your reports, kind of keeping the reports in a one or two concepts rather than trying to throw communications and home studies and licensing and everything about the case all onto one single report. Break it up so that you can see things easier. Where you've got multiple topics in one report, you might consider using the current record, our assumption would be current means the most recent, the most active. That's not always true. So it depends on how you've defined current in the logic of the system. So, but checking in on those things. And then I think using timelines in your aggregates is really, really important, and will be really helpful. So determining your different timelines and milestones throughout your process, and checking in on, or creating timelines rather, between the start and end of different phases of your process. And then, I mean, that's what I've got for you for report stats. In my, to me, they're very simple. They kind of come pretty naturally to and they feel very obvious to use for big topics. But I'd love to hear from you guys, because I think everybody on the phone is somewhat power users of the system. And so trying to determine how it is that you guys are utilizing them, or if you actually have any questions for me about the report stats. Maybe I've got a couple folks online. I'd love to get people. I think sharing is really valuable. So I was on call with Steve yesterday. He was always curious why folks don't speak online. So I'm gonna call you out, buddy, and see if you have any questions or thoughts. Or David, you're on also. I assume that you use report stats pretty heavily. You're unmuted. Yeah, I don't mute you guys at all. Yeah, and I would think, there's so many pieces to everyone's cases, right? And the kind of information that's being tracked in here. I think as admins of the system, determining what is not the term negligible of whether or not it's done. It's like, this is the minimum data points for our electronic records, and setting a report up for all child records if showing any records where A, B, C, D are empty, and then having each of those A, B, C, D as report stats, so that you can see those that are records that have empty in any one of those, would be really helpful. Because yeah, I mean, when I go in when I go into agency sites and we do a cleanup, I always start, if we're making plans, especially for agencies who have used the database for years, taking a peek at empty, just to see, are we clear with data entry? It could also be, for you guys that are on, if it is that important to get in, setting that field as required, and determining where that field is in the process, like at what point do your users enter data into that field? So making it more prevalent for them. Or potentially implementing an auto action to collect that data entry by Sam doing that. Sam could even do it as a date. So I typically like you guys to enter dates, and the date updates a case stage or updates something else, but you can always do it in the reverse, right? So just as far as trying to build in some data integrity points and to ease the data burden on your users, considering auto actions to clear up some of that empty. Great point. Heather, you're on. Have you used report stats? Do you have any comments or anything that you want to?
Sure. Yes, we use them quite often. I think more and more. I really like them because I think you can see all of the data that's on the report. You can see what case types are in there, countries, that kind of thing. And I think it makes it very easy for our users to be able to filter the data themselves instead of creating many different unique reports.
Right. I think of these as like people have a caseload report, and instead of having X number for all of your contractors and everybody that's working with you, having a single spot that then has each user or social worker or whoever it is that's doing that specific role for the case.
Right.
Yeah. Had anybody used the aggregates? I don't know if I don't always have the right terminology and verbiage, to describe these things, but I find them incredibly helpful. Has anybody utilized those for I was feeling like you could do them for placements and determining for placements that were discharged. It's kind of same concept as this, is how long are those placements? How long have they been engaged? I did set one up for placements for, oh, let me cancel out of this. Placements for the placing authorities, right? So who is it for? And the average amount of time that that placement is active. And so you could see that per county that's responsible for that youth. I'm curious if anybody had used those before. Does that make sense for you, Steve?
Yes, we haven't used them, but yeah.
Okay. David,
One thing
oops.
that I will add.
Go ahead,
Sorry,
Steve.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we have not used them, but I can see how they could be useful, especially that minimum, maximum, and such. So I'm going to start playing with those.
Yeah, good. Okay. And Steve, had you used them? You said not really.
No, I haven't used those. I was going to bring up something, just bring up another thing that we did use them for, but we can finish talking about it.
Yeah, well, I'm curious if you guys have any other, if you have any questions. So when I go in here, again, I mean, everything is so relative, which is one of the challenges I feel like when describing this or when doing webinars, because we're talking pretty specifically field to field. Maybe we need to talk things in more specific. So having, again, like talking about adoptions and what are some of the main milestones that we might want to get information from. Let me determine, would that be helpful? I think everybody on the call does adoption. Not everybody does foster care. So would it be helpful to talk about some major milestones and how to read and set up aggregates for your reports on a different call?
Totally.
Okay.
Aggregate fields have always messed me up because I could try things and I get weird results and I don't fully understand what.
Okay. All right. I'll set something up and or come up with help guides or videos or something so that I can get some information to you, because they're huge. This is like a really powerful piece of SAM that I'm not sure that it's being utilized very well. I'll actually do a little bit of activity tracking on folks to see if SAM is tracking this, but also who's utilizing it, because it's a huge amount of information. And if nobody's using it, I'm not doing the best job of communicating that it exists. But let's see. At first, okay, so generally when you see a report stat, it's not going to have any additional aggregate type information here. As soon as you hit totals, that's when you get options. So you can get options based, again, it's on the tables that are present on that report. And then if I were, so this is about children, we could figure out, like the average age of placement for kids in specific counties. We can figure that out of how many total days in care have they been in, if that is something that you are tracking in your database. I mean, everything is relative to what you guys are tracking, which again comes into play with your data is only going to be as good, or rather the information is going to be as good as the data that's input into it. So using that empty to make sure that values are in there. Right. I also noticed, because my data is like all helter skelter, because I'll just be rapid fire kind of getting information in for sample data. So I don't always think about it very clearly, but I started to get a lot of like, my length of an adoption was negative 2,000 days. And I was like, that's going to look really weird showing that to you guys. So checking in on these can also support you with, again, within data integrity, is our data, does it make sense? Because we might be inputting data just wrong. And so that'll help you check that as well. And then using, sort ascending, descending to kind of determine where are your outliers that are throwing off the expectations. But you can see that this is no longer every field. This is just those fields that are, again, number or currency. So the child's age, totals doesn't make sense for age, but the average and the minimum and maximum. So this is the child's age per county. And you can see, so this is again why you might have multiple reports, because, well, and actually, let's do this. Age per county. At this point in SAM's, how things are set up, because the span and the way the UI is set, if you have so many things going on, it's going to start to look really awkward, right? If I added another one, it'd be even further out to the right. I think everybody knows on this call, we're doing an interface update this summer. I think these report stats need to be pulled to the forefront, possibly as dashboards that the executive team are kind of seeing on a regular basis on the homepage, things like that. So as you guys play, please let me know how it would be more beneficial. But I'm thinking that just of different ways that to interface with these, because I think you want more things, right? So per county, I might want to see the age, the length of time, maybe social workers, I don't know, all kinds of things based on a single report. And instead of having 20 reports to show these, we might want to have 20 different dashboards that are related to all your placements for a time period or something like that. But so this here is like, this county has one youth with a placement, makes up 2% of our total 100% of placements in this report. The average age is 19, right? Because it's just one kid. But here they've got 13 kids, 23% of our total placements. Average age is 15. The minimum age is 6 and the maximum age is 20. This is kind of interesting information, right? So I think this could be, there's endless, like I said, kind of ways to utilize this. I think, David, you'd asked a couple months ago about median. I talked to Dimitri yesterday. We will probably incorporate median in kind of some upcoming things. So hopefully in the near future, median will be available as well here. But as far as kind of implementing the aggregates, do you guys feel a little, it sounds like you've got lots of things to do going and playing. Any other questions about it? I love it. I was very, I gave it all away. So if you have any questions on it, let me know. I will put the webinar up so you can refer back to it. There are some guides online about report stats. If you guys have any questions about setting them up or want anything else to see about how to read it, let me know and we'll talk real specifically about adoption or real specifically about age of kids or whatever kind of concepts that you guys want to bring to discussion. I'm happy to do that. Let's go back here. Next month, I decided I will do a Q&A on reports. So I'm hoping that you will just bring your questions. So, over the next month, set up some report stats. If you can throw those to me, any questions you have before that time period, I can set up some sample data and we can really play with it through the master site rather than going in anybody's individual sites. Or any other questions that are plaguing you that surround around reports. And if the discussion changes from reports onto something else because it's all interrelated, I'm happy to do that as well. So for now, take care. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
You're welcome, guys. Bye-bye.
You are